I'm just literal in telling them what to do, and it works so much better than trying to use some sort of analogy to coach.
Whatever.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That was shitty. Fix it this way. Do it again.
Yes.
Wow, it got fixed.
Welcome to the Coach 'em Up podcast. I'm here with Zach Zillner, and we are joined today by Will Ratelle. Will, what's up, dude?
Just got done lifting with you guys. Nothing better to do. Nothing better to do on a Sunday.
Yeah, the best way to spend a Sunday morning is watching Will fucking power clean 405 easily.
Power clean our deadlift, man.
Right, literally.
Lift and play hoops. That's it.
Yeah. So
I'm a simple man. That's all I need to be happy.
Yeah. So Will got into town yesterday, and Will lives in North Dakota, and we live in Austin, Texas, which is like tech bro
City.
Yeah. And he saw his first Cybertruck. And
Yeah, what'd you think of the first Cybertruck?
Can I say what I said?
Yeah.
I said, what the fuck is that? Dude, I'd never seen that before.
Right. And it was like, for those of you listening or watching, it was like wrapped and had like all this like crazy ass design on it and stuff, which again is like par for the course for Austin.
Have you ever been inside one of those things?
I have not been inside a Cybertruck.
Yeah.
So I couldn't really get the vibe. Is you guys like make fun of it, obviously a little bit.
A little
but would
bit,
you
yeah.
get one?
I would never own a Cybertruck. I enjoy an engine and like I'm like a truck guy.
Tim needs a tuned up exhaust.
Yeah.
Would you drive one, Zach?
I think I would drive one. Just yeah, I mean they're cool. I think it's one of those things I'd want to drive it if no one could see me in it. Or no one could see me get out and get in it. I think overall driving it,
It's
I
like
would
a
like
guilty
it.
pleasure.
Yeah. It's like the guy that drives the Lamborghini and pulls up and you're like, who the heck is this guy?
Right. See, I'm the opposite. If I was driving a Lamborghini, I'm pulling up at the front, I'm throwing the door up, and I'm taking my time getting out, dude. Yes, I am.
You're pretty satisfied with your truck, though.
I do love
That's a nice truck.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I do love that truck.
Don't get him started.
I would literally talk about trucks for an entire podcast.
So I just got one, and Tim was my broker, essentially. He sent me all the top listings from here to Timbuktu. And he's like, this is the one you have to get. Ask for this, blah, blah, blah. And you could do a second job as a car broker.
Maybe I'll start a YouTube channel, a truck YouTube channel.
Tim's Trucks.
Yeah, trucking with Tim. Hell yeah, fuck yeah.
How about Will tells us a little bit, his little elevator speech?
Yeah, that's right. No, enough about my trucks. Will, I know who you are. Zach knows who you are. I would imagine many watching and listening know who you are, but for those who don't, your background, start from your formative years, Will. Sports you played growing up, the whole deal.
All right. I played pretty much every sport growing up. Tennis, lacrosse, hockey, football, basketball, baseball. I mean, everything since I was like in first grade. Played everything. High school, football, basketball, baseball, quit basketball sophomore year so I could like lift in the off season.
Yeah.
And then like practice baseball more in the off season too. So I played baseball, football throughout my senior year. It's the only two sports I finished high school with. Played football at University of North Dakota. I was actually going to go into law enforcement. What's the major? Is that criminal justice probably? Yeah. I think I was a criminal justice major for like 2 semesters at UND. And then my advisor like put me in like the wrong classes. So I would have like... The way he kind of screwed me over. It was unintentional, obviously, but like I would have had to take an extra year and a half to graduate. Some classes are only offered in the spring or the fall, so I'd like wait till the next spring to get in. So I didn't want to graduate in 6 years. So I was like, well, what else could I do? And I like lifting weights, obviously. I had a good relationship with my strength and conditioning coach. And I was like, well, I might as well go into like Phi Ed. It was exercise science is what it was.
Okay.
So I'll change the majors, went into ex-phys or exercise science, graduated, kept playing football. Had a really short-lived on and off 2-year career, NFL, CFL, bounced around a ton. That was a really stressful part of my life. And then you get to like, you're 2 years into that life where you're like sleeping in a hotel one night and then you're back home for a night. And then, like my wife now was my girlfriend and it's like, is she going to follow me while I do this? So I had to make a decision. Am I going to keep chasing this or am I just going to like get a big boy job and have even though it's not a lot of money as a strength coach, at least have a salary, you know?
Yeah.
So 2 years in, there was an opening as a strength and conditioning coach at UND, my alma mater. Like I said, I had a good relationship with my strength coach, so he was the hiring manager for the role.
Yeah.
I didn't even really have to interview for the job. I mean, I did technically.
You said
but it was,
Right. Legally, you interviewed for the position. Yes, for
So-
legal purposes.
So I got offered that position, and I was like, and what's crazy is the day that I like officially was offered that position, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers gave me a call to go up there for a workout, not to get signed, to do a workout. And I was like, I can't, dude, because I could go up there, I could decline the job offer, go up there. Maybe I do get signed, but then maybe they cut me in like week 4 or something,
Right.
and I'm
Totally.
right back where I'm at. So, and now I'm still at UND. Been there since that was 2018 when I started working there.
Wow.
So it's 20,
How old are you?
24. I'm 31.
Okay. Yeah.
So I've been there ever since. I've worked with a ton of different teams. Just we've had staff changes. So, I mean, Zach, you understand the college, like 1 year with men's basketball, 1 year with not, and then you're with softball. So I've worked with a bunch of different teams there. And currently I'm working with volleyball, softball, and then I assist with the football team. So that's where I'm at now.
How's that transition from like chasing the football dream, like essentially your whole life, to finally that day where you're like, you know what, it's done? Was that hard for you? Easy decision? Like,
It was embarrassing, honestly, because
not making the NFL is embarrassing. Like, me too.
yeah, well, so I'll kind of take you through my experience. So I had a really good junior year in college. So that off season, junior to senior year, NFL teams coming to campus to meet with me, like take the Wonderlic test, get all my height measurements. They come make you do a 40, all these different things. So like going into my senior year, I was projected to get drafted, and then I had a good senior year. I didn't get invited to the combine. My agent was like, "You're going to get invited to the combine." I didn't get invited to the combine. He was pushing for me to get there. Didn't. Had a really good pro day, and then the draft comes around, and third day of the draft, I got a call from Tampa.
Okay.
And they said, "Hey, we have the 6th round pick. We're either going to take you or another fullback." They ended up with the other fullback. His name is Dan Vitale. He was from Northwestern. I think he had a pretty good 4 or 5 year career, because I kind of, because of that conversation, like I kind of followed up with how he was doing.
Yeah. Right.
But so they drafted him. He ended up getting cut after training camp, and I ended up signing as a free agent after minutes after the draft with Atlanta.
Okay.
So like actually, if I could make one different decision through this entire process, it would have been signing with Tampa, because I got a call. It was Dirk Cutter, who was the coach there. Mm-hmm. So he called me right after they picked Dan Vitale and said, "We want you to sign as a free agent." And that it was probably a 3-minute conversation with him. And I said, "Well, you guys just drafted a fullback. The likelihood of me making the roster is pretty slim."
Yep.
And he said, "No, we're going to move him to tight end."
Oh.
Which they ended up doing. And then because I didn't go there, he was kind of this hybrid fullback / tight end. But he was wearing the number in the 80s. He was like 82 or something.
Yeah.
And I would have been like a number in the 30s or 40s. Mm-hmm. So I would have been a true fullback. So anyways, I ended up signing with Atlanta. They cut me after the 4th preseason game, and that was the season of 2016. So that season of 2016, I'm living in Grand Forks. It was like every other week I'd get a call from a team to go work out.
Yep.
So like I ended up working out with Kansas City twice. They keep you overnight, and if they keep you overnight, you think they're going to sign you. Well, then they bring you back the next day, say, "Hey, we're not going to sign you," and they get you on a flight out of town again. So I had that. That was just really stressful. That entire 2016 fall, 2017. So 2017 spring, I ended up signing with Kansas City after I'd worked out for them several times.
what a roller coaster.
So then
It is a roller
they
coaster.
cut me in June
Okay.
after OTAs. So kind of like this time we're in now.
Yep.
So it's NFL offseason. July, I'm not with a team. So I go sign with Saskatchewan Roughriders up in the CFL. On practice squad, on active roster. On practice squad, active roster. Just back and forth, dude.
Yep.
They ended up cutting me at some point in the middle of the season. 3 weeks later, they called me and signed me
Hey, we
right
need
back.
you back. Yep.
And so it was just a really stressful time period for me with that. And then when I made the decision to be done, I was honestly, I was like ashamed of myself, embarrassed, because I had so many people supporting me.
Yeah.
I feel like you let everyone down.
Yeah. It's just embarrassing. And so at that time, I'm 25. I don't have a job. Like, you're just like chasing this dream that's never gonna really manifest.
Yep.
And so, I was just really ashamed. Didn't have a salary. Yeah, it's just embarrassing. But now I'm good with everything. I had a lot of like probably 2 to 3 years of bitterness about it.
Sure.
Physically, I was good enough to be there. Mentally, I wasn't like smart enough playbook wise. Like when I was with Atlanta, the guy ahead of me was Pat DeMarco, and I was way more athletic than him, but he was just so much smarter. He could make adjustments on the fly. He could have played guard. He could have played receiver because he knew the playbook so well. And I was the guy in the huddle. I'd hear the play call, and I'm like, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? Walking up to my position, like right before the snap starts, I'm like, all right, now I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, yikes.
So I just didn't make it. I wasn't good enough in that regard. So.
Yeah,
it was really hard. I was depressed for probably a year and a half.
Yeah,
I never really admitted that except to my wife. And it was just like I was ashamed.
Like you're so close. Like our sports careers are pretty much decided for us. You're just not good enough to go. So like always those, and we see it all the time with guys on the cusp of like NBA or not, or like for you NFL or not. And like that would be such a hard, like because you're this close. Like if it's a right situation, you could be a millionaire overnight or sleeping in a hotel, gym to gym to gym. Like,
and I think a lot of people don't. So obviously a large portion of my demographic people I work with are NFL guys, and what people don't see who aren't close to the business of the NFL or working with these guys directly is that most guys are going through your experience. It's the people you see playing on Sunday regularly and consistently. They're actually like the top 1% of the rest of the league, whereas like people are getting cut and signed all the time, and like you're not seeing these little transactions. You're on the practice squad, you're off the practice squad.
It's like a toxic relationship.
It is.
Let's get back together. We're breaking up.
Totally, dude. Yeah, and seeing that firsthand, and over the past 3 years, and like working with players, like they make a team, they're super excited, their family's excited. Everyone's hopes are high, and then 3 weeks later, a guard gets hurt, so they have to sign another guard, which means you're the guy on the chopping block.
Yep.
Right? And it's not even like, that's the other thing too, is like it has so little to do with your talent, your work ethic, it has so little to do with anything about you necessarily as a person or a player, and everything to do about what's best for the team.
The situation.
And also like, then you take into account, like there's politics as well. Like so-and-so liked this guy when he was at this other team and he didn't get a chance to draft him, and now he's with this team, so he wants to bring this guy on, so you're getting fucked. And
Yep. It's a lot of that.
Let's go into your combine stuff, because just watching you lift, you're obviously pretty powerful. Like, what was your 40? Like all those cool metrics.
I think you can still look this up. It's still like out there. I think my 40 was a 4.56. I think my vertical was a 36. My broad was a 910.
How big were you when you were doing all that?
I was like 250.
What? You were 254, Will?
I was 25 pounds heavier than I am now. 30 pounds
Burning a
heavier.
4.5?
Yeah.
Holy fuck, Will.
I think my bench press was 36 reps.
It's pretty good.
Yeah. My pro day was really
You're a
good.
physical freak of nature.
Yeah.
That's for anyone who doesn't know, even by NFL standards, that combination of size, weight, and speed is fucking terrifying. Wow.
Yeah.
So training wise, and I want to know, like at North Dakota, like what was the background, like the strength coach, like were you guys, because you like the Olympic lift now, were you guys big into Olympic lifting then, and was that kind of spawned your interest in using that for athletic development?
Yeah. So my strength and conditioning coach, his name is Nate Bockel. He's no longer at UND now. He was a big Olympic lifting guy, really good coach regarding technique and making sure you're proficient, and he's a really good coach in that regard. And I know I was good at it, so I liked it, and I got more and more into it as I did it. And now I've just carried into my coaching. So the strength program was very Olympic based. Every day was some sort of Olympic lift variation, some sort of like a squat or a pull. I guess it was probably just like your standard S&C for college football, but a lot of barbell work, a lot of Olympic lifts, a lot of squatting, a lot of pressing. So, and that's the way I program now for most of my my athletes.
Were you always like pretty naturally gifted in the weight room? Like, did it come pretty easy to you?
Yeah. Compared to my peers,
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of natural ability. Yeah.
You know, on the topic of Olympic lifts, okay. Yes.
I love how I've taken on this identity of like the Olympic lifting guy.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny. I don't know.
Well, I want to talk about that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Let's give an opportunity for that because, in fact, before I even propose the question, can you just speak to that a little bit about how that's kind of come about and how you've seen that happen and what that's like?
Yeah. So I don't know where I should start with it.
Maybe
Let's do this. Oh yeah, I'll just go. I'll just start ranting.
just rip, and then
see where it
I'll
goes.
interject.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, I've always loved Olympic lifting.
Yeah.
I would say in like 2018, maybe 2019, Olympic lifting in the lens of collegiate football strength and conditioning weight rooms, it started to phase out nationally.
Is there something you would attribute that to in particular, or?
Yeah. So, you know, somebody like Nick DeMarco hadn't had a big post. He's a guy at Elon. He had like a big Instagram post probably back in like 2019 saying why he doesn't use the Olympic lifts. And it was received really well by a lot of people. And we'll get into like the reasons for that at some point. But
Okay.
I think he was probably one of the catalysts for it.
Okay.
If you guys are familiar with Max Schmarzo, he's like a
Yes.
big strength and conditioning.
Yep.
He's kind of like phased himself out of the strength. He's now like a basketball guy. But anyways, back then.
Strong by Science
Yes,
is
yes,
the
yes.
Instagram handle for all those listening and watching.
And it was like, we're not going to do, kind of the sentiment was we're not going to do Olympic lifts because the Olympic lifts are the means for training like power expression or power development. We have these other means, trap bar jumps, loaded jumps, whatever, that are less technically demanding, easier to load up, don't have to spend time teaching it, and you get higher like power outage with less work basically.
Yes.
Which if that's the lens you're viewing it through, cool, like that's fine with me. And then I actually ended up going through a phase where like, you know what? This makes sense to me. I'm not going to do Olympic lifts for a while.
Yep.
And
I did the same thing.
And anecdotally, just for me, I kind of hated when I was not Olympic lifting. I probably went like a year and a half not doing it. Doing a lot of French contrast, doing a lot of loaded jumps, a lot of trap bar jumps, band assisted jumps, which I think are just dog shit.
Oh, I can't wait. I'm going to circle back around to that because I've had my journey with those as well. Keep going.
So they started to phase out in
Yes.
college strength and conditioning. And just at some point, just like me being in the field coaching, critically thinking about things, the Olympic lifts just provide more than rate of force development, triple extension, power output. Like those are the kind of the three measuring sticks that people use to support or to not support the Olympic lifts. Because many proponents of Olympic lifts will say, well, you get triple extension, you get high rate of force development. And then the people who oppose Olympic lifts say, well, you get better triple extension, better power development with trap bar jumps. Right. It's like, you got to look beyond that stuff. And there's so many more things that the Olympic lifts provide. Some are non-quantifiable, some are quantifiable, that they provide that are outside the scope of rate of force development, triple extension, and power development.
Right.
What was the original
So
question?
let me ask you this, because I think this might be a good follow-up question to tease that out a little bit. What are some of those things that you find to be helpful or useful or beneficial regarding Olympic lifts that aren't necessarily
The standard.
straightforward thinking, sort of mouth breathing, sports sciencey stuff where it's that we all get caught up in? I'm not making fun of anyone for loving that stuff. You should care about it. But what are those other things that you feel like Olympic lifts offer that you can't really get other places?
Yeah. So one thing is creating propulsion onto an external body of mass in a much different way than anything else. Yeah, like you're creating propulsion onto an external body of mass only to have that body of mass be redirected back onto you within milliseconds.
Yes.
You can't get that doing anything else unless you're like in some sort of contact sport and you're actually playing the sport, you know?
Well, I'd argue like the catch is probably one of the most important things. Like,
I would
where you're
agree.
catching it, like above your shoulders versus like below your waist. Like your center of mass is totally different.
Yeah, that's another thing. You have to drop your center of mass in order to gain better leverage, acting on that external body of mass, which again you can't get doing anything else.
And as we all learned today, I'm terrible at doing.
Just being able to, so like people will say triple extension. Well, what about triple flexion? The ability to flex your hips, knees, and ankles to get under that load quickly. I mean, how many examples could we show of just someone immediately dropping under an opponent to gain better leverage? Like that happens all the time in sport. Think about the shoulder joint, the hips, the knees, the ankles, the T-spine, how quickly they have to get in and out of end ranges of motion, under load, under duress,
Yeah.
at a high velocity.
Yeah.
Simultaneously. You know, there's all of these other things. One other thing off the top of my head is like the elastic qualities of the tissue in deep ranges of motion.
Yeah.
Dropping under the bar in a clean and immediately bouncing out of the hole. I mean, you could load up deep tier plyos if you wanted to, but you couldn't load up 405 on a deep tier plyo and bounce up and down, you know, like right. I guess you could.
You could try.
Yeah. So those are just some of the things that I think they provide that you really can't get. And I hate the term, like the phrase best bang for your buck, but like the best bang for your buck kind of exercise for all of those things being done simultaneously is the Olympic list.
Coach 'em Up is proud to be sponsored by Plyomat. Plyomat is a jump mat that measures ground contact times, vertical jump height, and reactive strength index.
Plyomat's trusted by over 750 coaches in 25 different countries.
It's something that you can use in training day in and day out to give immediate feedback and drive output and intent.
Plyomat's always in stock. When you order your Plyomat, you can get it within 1 to 3 business days and start your training immediately.
If you get a group of athletes challenging each other to jump higher, get off the ground quicker, it transforms that workout into a highly competitive, highly potent stimulus.
If you would like access to the best jump mat on the planet, use Coach 'em Up 5 to get 5% off at checkout.
Again, code Coach 'em Up 5 for 5% off. Come jump with us. Get a Plyomat.
The Coach 'em Up podcast is sponsored by Squat Wedgies. Tim, what are squat wedgies?
Squat wedgies are an adjustable squat wedge, 7, 13, and 20 degrees.
It's big enough to elevate your whole foot and not just your heel.
Because it's rubber, it doesn't slide on surfaces.
It's 22 pounds, so it's durable and stable enough for even your biggest athletes.
There's a 90-day risk-free trial. The shipping is free, and
get 15% off squat wedgies with our discount code CoachEmUp15.
Coach 'em Up 15 for 15% off of the best squat wedge on the planet.
So like you often hear like people, their biggest pushback is like, it's too hard to teach or it's too technical. And I would always say, well, then you need to be better at coaching. So like you have an athlete day one and you have, you know, some clean variation. Like how do you go about breaking that down to coach it up so they're, you know, good enough to do the lift? How would you go from there?
I guess I do have a model a little bit that I use, but it's going to be different athlete to athlete. But I want them to front squat, obviously. I want them to know how to RDL, obviously. But like when we get into actually teaching, I like to just do a trap clean, a full trap clean, where I have them get up on their toes, shrug the bar. I'll allow them to have a little bit of an elbow bend because I like the early arm bend if they can do it right. And I have them hold that position where they're up on their toes, they're shrugged, and I make them feel where the bar is touching their upper thigh. Hold it. Now drop as fast as you can into a front squat. The way I teach it is don't think about your arms, drop into the front squat, let the arms just bend naturally so that the bar's about on top of your shoulders. And usually, in my experience, people can do the first couple of reps and it looks horribly, but then after rep 4, 5, 6, they start to kind of figure it out. And you just hammer, I like to hammer that drill. And we would just work top to bottom. So we'll start with after the full trap clean, then we'll do like a high hip clean. And then we'll just start hang cleaning. And the way I teach it is I'll have them dip. And I make sure that they understand my language too. So when I say dip, that means push your knees forward and out a little bit so that your belly button or your center of mass drops vertically. Keep the shoulders back behind the bar. So that's what I would teach is the dip. Make sure you get the dip right. After you dip, then you can hinge a little bit. Make sure that bar's dragged down the thigh, keeping the bar tight to your body. And then you just reverse that pattern and get to that position that we hammer out with the full trap clean, up on the toes, shrugging the bar, arms straight or a little bit bent, quickly drop under the bar again. And I just have this top down approach. So we'll go from hang clean from above the knee, hang clean from below the knee. Then I'll have them start pulling from the floor, but I put them on blocks, so it's a little bit elevated, and we'll just work our way down to the floor.
Nice.
That's kind of my model, and then it'll get tweaked here and there where people have some different deficiencies.
Sounds like it's a pretty logical, common sense approach there. Yeah.
I mean, I struggled teaching it for some people who some people just can't figure it out very well. And,
Yes.
And so I'm really sympathetic to the people who say it's really hard to teach, especially if you have a group of 20 kids. I'm totally sympathetic to that argument. But the problem with that is, people will make that argument. It's too hard to teach, or try teaching 25 eighth grade girls to do this. Then you're going to want to not clean anymore. And I'm totally sympathetic to that. But then what they'll do on the back half of that argument is they'll say, well, fuck it, we're just going to do trap bar jumps. And actually trap bar jumps are better. And it's like, no. They're not comparable. They're really not comparable. There's so much different.
Yeah.
They're not comparable. But now you've added this extra
layer of justification.
Yes. Exactly, which is poor.
Right.
So what do you do? Let's say, because I feel like you can get an athlete to get somewhat of a decent clean, either 1 or 2 sessions. At what point are you at this mark, the athlete isn't picking it up, and then we go to a different variation or trap bar variations or anything like that?
So with athletes on campus, I never do that. If the kid's lagging behind, too bad for them. You got to keep. Because I don't want to treat them special, with private clients, I've never really had that experience because I'm never working with a group of more than 3 people. So the teaching, it becomes more individualized and more,
easier.
It gets easier to teach. Yeah. So I've never really had that.
Context for people at home, the athletes that you get, they're usually 4-year athletes.
Yes.
Or the people you train on the side are probably high school. So you kind of have that longer time frame. What would your argument be, when coaches are I only have this athlete for 9 months, or I'm in the pros and I only have them for maybe 4 months and they go to a different team. Would your strategy for coaching be different, or what things would you take into account?
It would be different. So I would agree with all of those things as to why you shouldn't use the Olympics. I agree with all of those points.
I think people miss context.
Yeah, my issue is then when people on the back half.
It's better part.
It's the better. Yeah. It's it's not. Yeah. But if I was in the NFL coaching NFL guys, it's really unlikely I'm going to make them clean or snatch for all the reasons you just listed.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that.
To that point too. So I had this period of time where I kind of adopted that sentiment because I only had guys for 4, sometimes 3 weeks, and then they're gone for a week and back. It's, really what I'm having to do is just control volumes and intensities. And they're really this idea of having something super technical be involved really gets thrown out the window if the goal is to provide a really good training session and give guys enough of a stimulus that they're getting a good workout and we're in and out in an hour and a half. And, and then as time went on, I had guys requesting they wanted to clean and stuff like that. I was like, well, absolutely, let's do it. And what I noticed immediately, and now twice a week, we either have a hang variation or a clean from the floor. And the reason why, and this is the biggest reason for adding it back into the training program for me, is because it's fucking awesome. It's so much fun. And the guys like it. Now, here's the thing. I have, and especially working with football players, guys have wrists, elbows that are beat to shit, shoulders, but even then,
that's when you modify.
Yeah, we do clean pulls, baby, and they love, and that's awesome too. So those variations also too give me enough flexibility where it's I don't have to be rigid about this. Hey, we've got clean variations. If I have someone who says I'm out, I'm not doing a clean pull, I'm not doing none of that, I'm gonna have them go do loaded jumps, but not because it's necessarily comparable.
Right.
but because it's just another way of training something similar that is good too. Like they're both good.
Well, it's no different
Exactly.
than, like,
But not because they're interchangeable necessarily.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
we do it for every other lift, like lower body strength. Like if you have a guy with a back issue and back squats don't work, you go split squat or front squat. Like you change all these things. But for the Olympic lifts, I feel like people are so inundated with, well, if it's not this perfect clean, then like we just can't do it at all.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy.
That's do you guys follow Pat Basil?
Yeah.
I do not. Wait, I do.
Yeah, you
I
do.
do.
Yeah,
Yes,
you
I
do.
do. Yeah.
So he made a point that like you don't get a quality training stimulus unless the technique is near. I don't want to straw man him, but nearly like highly proficient technically.
Yes.
And I would agree that you probably get a better training stimulus if it's the better the technique is. But like you think about certain variations of the lifts, you can intentionally do like a no contact clean or a muscle snatch where your feet don't move. I could make the argument that those are just shitty versions. Those are just shitty.
You just did a shitty
That's just a
snatch.
shitty rep of a snatch, you know, and you still get a quality training.
Some of my
stimulus.
reps this morning might have qualified as that.
Yeah, so I was just kind of adding to the point where like you can still get a good training stimulus if the technique is like kind of shitty.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you don't just like let shitty reps be shitty reps and you
Right.
coach them up, but you're still getting a quality training stimulus.
Yep.
So
It's
yeah.
like, I mean, it's a skill. Like at the end of the day, like lifting is a skill and you need to keep hammering these movements over and over. And where people lack, like I'm sure if people, like what are different things? Like I'm sure the biggest thing is people struggling with the front rack position. So like what are different exercises or things you do besides just like get your elbows up higher?
That's really it.
Well,
Honestly.
that's my biggest excuse. Like put your elbows up.
Literally point your elbows to the ceiling.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
But for some coaches at home, like let's say I'm a high school, football coach that I have to do weights, and I'm noticing everyone's doing the, typical high school clean. Like, what are different things you would preach to get that kind of like better front shelf position?
I don't know. I would just
Do better, kid.
do better.
Yeah.
Try harder.
You know what? Listen. You want to know? So I record a ton of content, and I record most reps of most of my athletes, particularly when I first start working with them. And when it comes to hang cleans, power cleans, just recording the rep and
huge.
showing them. I know people that might sound,
It's crazy.
outlandish, but literally just be like, hey, here's what you're doing. And people, they'll go, oh. I'm like, yeah, I need your elbows like here, dude. And they go, oh, okay. And I shit you not, you do that just a couple times and like it'll almost instantaneously, in most cases, you're like, yeah, that was perfect or good enough for us to start loading this thing up.
Yep.
Yeah.
100%. I made a YouTube video about this like a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, that like, I don't cue things anymore. I'm just literal in telling them what to do. And it works so much better than trying to use some sort of analogy
Yes.
to coach.
Whatever.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just like, here, I'm going to record your set. That was shitty. Fix it this way. Do it again.
Yes.
Wow, it got fixed.
Yes.
Like it's so much better.
Well, there's a lot of mental masturbation that goes on with like, it's like, I gave them the perfect cue or, and it's like, it's so unnecessary. And I've gotten to a place where I'm just so uninterested and like, I want to be as uncreative as possible when it comes to getting the outcome. I want to draw a straight fucking line from point A to point B. And how do I get there the quickest without any opportunity of it getting the message getting diluted or convoluted or misunderstood? No. Here's what you did. Here's what I want you to do. And then also too, to piggyback off this little rant I'm having right now, is people, in my experience, clients, athletes, just a general principle, always learn a new skill or grasp an idea when they feel as though they've arrived to that conclusion or to that new movement strategy on their own.
Yeah. They learn it better that way.
Yes.
And it becomes ingrained better.
100%. And there's a level of confidence that is really invaluable when you arrive at a place under your own cognitions and someone can just like kind of lay the toolkit at your feet and then you're able to assimilate. And I'm not saying like, don't coach or don't, you know what I'm saying? But I think that there really is this fine line between like inserting yourself to a point. Like, at what point are you just listening to yourself talk?
Yeah.
So in your own training, you obviously, I mean, we saw it today. It's pretty absurd.
It's pretty good.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. What are your like own personal training goals right now? Like, are you...
Dude, what we were talking about last night at the Mexican place, when you were saying that you can only focus on one thing at a time. I swear, when I hit the age of 30, which is a year and a half ago,
yes,
I started to feel that way. I just try to do way too much shit. I want to dunk. I want to run fast.
Yes.
I love doing plyos. I want to Olympic lift heavy. I want to squat and dead heavy. Mm-hmm. I want to do everything, but it gets so hard that I just have to focus on like one or two of those things.
Yeah.
Mitigate the loss and the other qualities for a time being, and just kind of cycle through. Like, I mean, my goal is just like dunk into my 50s, probably not going to happen, but dunk into my 80s, not going to happen.
Right.
I want to
Great goal though.
I want to clean 405 as long as I can. I want to squat in upper 500s as long as I can. I want to do all of these things as long as I can.
Yeah.
And I'm just staving off death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How has your training changed? At like what point were you like, we kind of talked about this during training of like, okay, you kind of recognize your age and recoverability, and what are different things that you used to be able to get away with when you were 25 and now you have to be more intelligent with it?
If I know I'm playing basketball, I have to make basketball the thing of the day. It's really hard to sprint for my training session and then at 7 p.m. go play pickup 5-on-5.
Dude.
And then the next day still feel good enough to do stuff.
Yep.
It's just like general recoverability. Like, if I'm going to play basketball, that's my thing for the day. That's like the main thing. But yeah, just like I do way less number of exercises, way less number of sets than I used to do. I do a lot of just like pick 3 to 4 exercises for the day. And one of those exercises isn't even an exercise. It's like jumping for 10 minutes and that's my warm up. And then I do like 3 exercises, and it's a lot of it's work up to a top set, maybe do a back off set, and then I move on to the next thing. It's like the volume is just so much
I think
lower.
that's the biggest thing. The volume gets you. How is training, like your knowledge now getting older? I feel like it's helped me program for my athletes now, because I feel like when they do 3-hour practice, like my body now probably feels like what theirs does. So has that changed your training at all? Like when I was younger, I did way too much with my athletes. Sorry to all my former athletes.
I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if I'm losing touch with what they feel, because I'll get into that same mindset of like, holy shit, they're probably really beat up and I want to scale back. But then I think about when I was 22, dude, I could lift at 6 a.m. Then I could go do a 2.5 hour practice on football on a Tuesday, do all of that on a Tuesday, and Wednesday morning lift again and feel fine.
Yeah.
So like, maybe I don't want to go soft on the athletes, because maybe they are fine. I don't know. I'm afraid like sometimes if I get into that mentality that I might be losing touch.
Right.
I might be losing touch on both sides of the spectrum, you know?
Were you pretty dialed in college as far as like strict with training, getting to bed on time, eating right? Like, did you figure that stuff out sooner than later?
Not sleep wise. I would stay up and go on YouTube.
Oh yeah.
So no, not sleep wise. Diet wise, no. Training wise, yeah. I always put a lot of effort into it, and I was really intentional with it. Practice wise, I kind of dicked around a lot in practice. So no, I guess would be the answer.
Yeah.
No.
Well, I always think with like athletes, we always joke like the sooner you figure it out, it just makes life easier.
Yeah.
But you'll get away with what you can until you can't.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so I feel like now we're older now, so the stuff I used to be able to get away with, like,
have you changed a ton? Because you said you're 34.
Yeah.
So like the way you're programming for the girls basketball team, is it a lot different than when you were 26?
Yeah, like I think more, and it all depends on context. Like at the mid-major level, like you need to train the snot out of these kids, because they're probably
and that's where I'm at.
Yeah. So they're probably not as gifted in like anthropometrically. Like they're just not as tall, a step slower, probably not as strong. And so like you need to make them as physical and robust as possible. And then at the top level, like their skill component is so good. They're freak outliers anyway. So it's more of like weight room's going to complement the court. because basically you just need to fine tune him and keep him robust for his season. But yeah, the stuff I was looking at programs I did 10, 15 years ago at like Southern Miss and some of these small schools, I'm like, this would crush our kids now. But they're also way more athletic and can do a lot more things physically on the court than some of those mid-major type athletes can do.
And they're granted by the NCAA a lot more court time now, right? Too?
Way more time. So we can practice like 4 hours. We were talking about this the other day.
4 hours isn't 4 hours.
Yeah.
4 hours, 6 hours for the week.
And then like Tim and I were talking about this, like how many things I thought were dumb in training when I was younger versus now older. Like the accessory work we would do back in the day, we didn't know accessory work. Like you wouldn't catch me doing calf raises or unilateral work for the most part.
That's
like,
me right now.
It was like bench squat dead. And like these kids would get way better. But I think when you get to the top tier, like they're more, it's like working on a Ferrari versus working on like a Honda Civic. Like a Civic you can take on a road trip all day long and you're fine. Like you're not going to take a Ferrari on a road trip or you're going to run into some issues. So I think maybe that's a good question for you. Have you changed anything in your training, like exercises or machines or modalities you thought were stupid 10 years ago and now they're like part of your program?
I think the thing that has changed the most for me is, well, I have like more confidence now in what I think than what I did when I was like 25 or 26, when I was just like getting my feet wet. Because at that point, you're trying to prove yourself and you're trying to like insert all of these different modalities and you're trying to make yourself look smarter. The thing that has changed the most now is that I keep it simpler. I'm not trying to like do a bunch of contrast sets. I'm not trying to do.
I was just about to ask you a question.
I'm not trying to do. Just like everything is simpler. Hey, this is your task. Do the task. Do it as well as you can. Move on to the next thing. There's not a bunch of like girls running around with their heads cut off in the weight room and it's kind of chaos. It's just a lot more like simple.
Structure.
Yeah.
What was the catalyst shift for you there? Because we were kind of talking, I think before the show started, it's all blurring together for me, about how we both like had this experience where it was like everything was French contrast. And
I went through that phase.
Yes.
Dude.
And then you shifted and I think I heard you speak on your YouTube page perhaps about how like when you're contrasting things like that, like what you're actually getting is just like a shittier version of each of those things sequentially than as if you were to just do the thing.
Yeah.
Well, you have to be in really good shape to do 3 back-to-back exercises that are high intense.
Right.
High intensity. And I don't think athletes are that in shape to do those demands. Like they might be really in shape to play basketball, but that's a totally different ball game going from a back squat to a hurdle hop to a box jump or whatever you want to do.
And for the people who are like listening to this and who are saying it's like, well, you're supposed to rest 2 to 3 minutes between each one of those things. It's like, okay, well, why wouldn't you just fucking do the depth jumps, rest 2 minutes between those, 2 to 3 minutes between those or whatever. And then, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't want to make the argument for you. I want to hear your opinions and points of view and then how you kind of, like, was there like something that happened or just what was the shift in thinking that got you to that place where you're like, I'm going to move away from contrast and just focus on individual things?
Yeah. Well, like, so French contrast, kind of like the argument in favor of it is like because of the post-activation potentiation. And now we're going to do this loaded movement to potentiate your plyometrics so you can jump higher and produce more power. And it's like, yeah, but if I just spent 3 to 5 minutes jumping, got a lot of reps jumping, I'm gonna increase my jump height with each jump. I'm gonna like get to my peak performance faster and probably more efficient, and I'm probably gonna reach a higher peak performance just doing that than trying to go from this back squat where you're like bracing really hard. It's like a totally different motor pattern, and you're gonna shift back and forth from like the compression expansion type of movement strategies. I mean, that's essentially the argument. It's like French contrast ends up just being like you said, it's just like you end up doing shittier reps than you would if you just did the one thing by itself. And it's like, it's super, I've heard the argument from people that it's more efficient doing it that way. But if you do it as it's meant to be done or intended to be done, where you do your heavy lift, you rest for the designated rest time,
Yep.
and then you do your jump, and then you rest for the designated rest time, then you do your loaded jump, and then you rest, and you go through that entire cycle.
It's
That's
long
like
time.
8 minutes to get through
One round.
and then they'll say, now you got to do full rest before you start another one. That's
right.
like 3 to 4 more. Like, it's not more efficient. That takes you 20 minutes to get through 3 rounds. So,
Good luck doing that
yeah.
in college setting.
Exactly. Yeah. And then that's where in the college setting it gets implemented. Like I made this mistake. I implemented it where you really didn't take a rest in between each exercise. You did the exercise.
Yep.
You took your rest was walking to the next thing, and then you did your exercise.
Yep.
You walked to the next thing.
Totally.
And then when you completed the circuit, then you got your 2 to 3 minutes.
Yep.
And then you restarted. Yeah, I mean, you said you didn't want to make the argument for me, but you did. You made a better argument.
Well,
you articulated it better than I
And
did.
I'm gonna, because I still use contrast. I still use it in the way that you just described. But what I've found, particularly with the pros, I've got a group of like 8 guys, right? One thing that is for sure gonna make this thing suck for everybody is a bunch of motherfuckers standing around with their dick in their hand. Forgive me for the analogy, people, but that's, you know what I mean?
And in the college setting, a lot of head coaches would hate
Can't sit
seeing
still.
that too.
Yes.
So you got to modify it. For
Yeah,
them
and like
too.
so, I think people, I think a lot of coaches have a problem admitting what I'm saying right now, or like they don't want to. But like the fact of the matter is like the flow of a training session, how they're experiencing it, is it enjoyable? Are we staying engaged? Those things are just as important as
matters.
like it fucking matters a lot. And I've found that like, okay, and so I'm pushed up against this thing. It's like, do I make these guys rest 3 minutes between these depth jumps? Really? Am I going to fucking do that? The answer is no.
I don't want to rest 3 minutes.
I'm not.
between-
So what I do is I actually give them autonomy. I say, listen, guys, we've got 4 movements. We're going to get 3 to 4 rounds of this. These are the reps for each of the movements. I want you to move at your own pace. I prefer if you're fully recovered before you get back to the next thing. For one guy, that might be 20 seconds. He's like, fuck it, I'm running right through this. You know what? And great, cool. And then another guy, he's going to rest. And it ends up being that like people kind of get to work on their own schedule, but it's enjoyable. They're moving at the pace that they want to move at, and the work is still getting done. Is it as high quality per se as if we were doing like these, specific time frames of rest? I don't know.
It probably is though for them, because psychologically, if you give them the physiological explanation of why you're going to rest so that creatine phosphate can replenish, fuck that. They don't give a shit.
Dude, fuck
if they feel ready to go, they're more recovered if they feel ready to go
exactly.
after a minute than they do after 3 minutes.
You know when you're ready to go.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, like who am I? And like, yeah, there's this piece of it's like, I'm not, yeah, I don't feel the need to control the session in that way that I once did and kind of force everyone into that box. And the session, it goes better. And it's like, someone listening to this is going to be like, that's a shitty reason to do something. Like, where's the evidence? Where's your study? It's like, go fuck yourself. Like, you know what I mean? Like, come stand in my weight room, come hang out, come listen to the jokes we're cutting up before we go from one movement to the next. And then tell me that it's worse, You won't.
Yep. So with my situation, with the athletes I work with, I'll talk about the volleyball team. So I keep them on a clock. I time their rest periods for Olympic lifts and for whatever like the heavy barbell movement is of the day. The reason I do that is because one, I don't trust them when it comes to like, hey, take the rest you need, because they will do
It'll
a
be
set
5 minutes before they get back to the bar.
or it'll be
The other way,
30, or it'll be
quick,
30
quick.
seconds
Yeah.
because it'll be a group of 2 girls at a rack and they'll just do a set, next person do a set,
Yep.
and then that like 25 set. Not like that's not long enough. But then the other thing for me, the main reason I time the rest periods is because I don't want some girl starting doing her last set of back squats when some girls like on her third set of cleans
100%.
because there's so much. And then some girls are finishing the session 15 minutes earlier than someone else.
Yes.
Now half the team's waiting for half the team to finish and they want to be dismissed and they can't get dismissed yet and that kind of thing.
In that setting, you're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
That's it. That's what you have to do.
What are things you mix in? Like you got a heavy back squat, and what do you do anything to keep them busy?
Yeah, sometimes that all depends on my mood.
Yeah.
Definitely when I was younger, I did every single time. But like I said a few minutes ago, I'm just trying to keep it simple. So like there's designated exercises, designated times in the training session where it's explained to them, hey, this is exactly what we're front squatting right now. Get your quality set of front squats done. You rest. I'm going to have the clock for you. I'm going to tell you when to do the next set. So like actually, no, I don't do anything right now. Currently with my volleyball team, no, I just tell them to rest. And I guess the only rule is you can't like sit down. You just gotta kind of stand there and go get some water or something. But yeah, so no, not right now. But in the past I have. And if you got to do that as a strategy to like keep them busy, I think it's totally justified.
Yeah.
We were enjoying piling on about how much we don't like band assisted jumps anymore. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. So I think what's the primary justification for band assisted jumps that you guys have heard?
I feel like it's
first.
like overspeed training with like sprinting, and therefore if you do it with jumping, then you could.
And are you not a fan of band assisted jumps either?
For me, I don't think the risk reward is there for me. So if
they hit their head on
you
the
have a
floor or
head
something?
coach and you're jumping higher than you're normally jumping, and then the landing. So if I have a kid, our starting point guard does that, propels herself in the air, lands weird, and we get hurt, that's a hard thing for me to justify in the staff meeting of why she can't place that.
Well, coach, did you have to show them?
Yeah,
Well,
well-
coach, we were just doing, they're like, because honestly, like you really think about it from that lens too.
Yeah.
If you're just a motherfucker, you don't know anything about training, you walk in and see people doing that, you go, what the fuck are they doing,
Totally.
dude?
But that's what it should be. Like lifting is like, or training in general, it's risk mitigation. So it's like, what are movements that I can get the highest, ROI on and also keep them the safest? And for me, like there's a lot of unpredictability about being on bungees, jumping in the air.
Yeah.
And if you're someone that knows nothing about training and walk in on that, you're either going to think, A, that's really cool, sick, or you're going to be like, why are they doing that? How is she landing?
Yeah.
All these other things. And like, I can't be like, coach, it's overspeed training, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, she hurt her knee, so what's the point?
Yeah, so get her off the fucking bands. Then.
Yeah. So that's my thing. I've heard the overspeed.
Yeah.
So
So the overspeed thing is like, it's actually not over. Like that's such a poor justification. It's not an overspeed. Like you compare it to overspeed sprinting. If your stride frequency doing overspeed sprinting is not fast enough, you're gonna fall on your face. There's a negative consequence
That's
to
right.
keep up with
You're
that
literally
demand.
being forced to run.
If you're not producing like the requisite rate of force development in a band assisted jump, there's no negative consequence. So like there's no actual demand there, like with the rate of force development kind of overspeed argument. So it's just like it's so poor.
I think
That's my main gripe with it is that
from like the other justifications I've heard for why they're great is like from a neurological perspective, you're spending less time on the ground, but you're
not
getting higher in the.
a lot of times you're not.
Yeah, I watch it. It's like full foot deep flexion, and then you're jumping out.
And like I love it, like the kids that pull down on the band.
Yeah.
You're pulling down on the band because it's fun.
And you were like 5 feet off the ground,
dude.
And I'm like, and then you got the same coaches will do that, but like depth drops are too high, and you're just like, well, I don't get it. Maybe I need to read more.
I think so. I used to program band assisted jumps, and that's kind of why I feel like I can make fun of this stuff because I used to do it.
I did. I've done it, dude.
So, like,
did it for years, dude. If you go to my Instagram, you'll see every single football player I ever worked with.
Yeah.
Band assisted.
It does
jumps.
look cool. I'll give him that.
It looks fun.
No,
it is fun.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Now, I think
Yeah.
it's great for like if you wanted to use like a low level player for like a recovery context, a return to play.
Yeah.
So that's
Like,
what I was
yeah.
just about to say that. Like, so I never program that stuff now, but if I were to program band assisted jumps, it would be for some sort of return to play protocol. They haven't jumped in 6 months. Here, let's reduce body weight by having them hold onto a band, reduce the landing force, and then give them some like volume and foot contacts at a lower intensity. That's like the only time I could ever see myself
justifying that.
Yeah. And in that scenario, they're not going to be jumping 4 feet in the air. It's going to be like a 6-inch jump.
Well, it's so high, it's like not predictable where they're going to land. And I risk reward.
Matt Watson was on the show, and he made a really good.
Me and Matt have talked about it before too.
Have.
Yeah.
So he gets, the boss of Bounce, Mr. Matt Watson himself, gets very worked up over this topic, and I like bringing it up because he gets passionate about it. But even in the sort of context that we were just explaining, what he said to me is like, okay, well then why wouldn't you? Let's say they can't jump 6 to 8 inches and they need band assistance to do that. Why wouldn't you just jump 2 inches? And just jump, just get regular jumps, and then build that up over time. And I'm like, that's a pretty good argument.
Doesn't look as cool.
That's a pretty good argument, Matt. It doesn't look cool at all. So something that I saw you post about recently. I can't remember what. By the way, you do a great job on YouTube.
Oh, thank you.
You do.
Thank you.
If you guys don't follow Will's YouTube channel, follow it because he lifts heavy fucking weights and he puts some really good thoughts out there.
Well, what I like about it, I'm
content.
gonna gas you up a little bit too.
Please.
I was watching a few of them, and I don't know about you guys, but like when I'm like 20 minutes into my training session, that's when I have like my best ideas about anything.
Yeah.
And I feel like you literally like through the video, it's like, all right, he's get his warm up sets and he hits his first heavy weight, and then he comes over, he's like, food for thought right here. Drops some really good knowledge. And I'm like, yes, I know exactly what he's feeling right now. But no, that was my thing.
You talked about, and maybe we touched on this a little bit earlier, but I want to dive deeper. The concept of volume, training volume versus effective sets. And I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, the idea of volume being a bit flawed, and instead of directing towards just adding like tonnage week to week, shifting focus to just getting effective training sets.
Yeah.
I hope I framed that question correctly, and that's what you were trying to get across, but could you speak to that?
Yeah. So my issue with like talking about training volume is that some people define training volume as like sets times reps. Some people define it as sets times reps times weight. There's like multiple different definitions. So nobody's really on the same page with training volume. When I was younger, I would try to track my training volume. I'd be like, oh, I did 3 sets of 5 at 405. Next week I did 4 sets of 5 at 405. And then I did 3 sets of 3 at 465. It's like, wait, did I just increase volume or did I not? You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
The math gets all murky, and like it doesn't account for what you're trying to do. Is you're trying to account for magnitude of stress with the with this kind of like math way of thinking about training volume, but you're not taking into account. Let's just talk about back squatting, for example.
Okay.
You're not taking into account time that the bar is just on your back, whether you're walking in or out of the rack. How much rest you're taking in between reps. You squat down, you squat up. If it's lighter, you're going to be able to squat down quicker. If it's heavier, you're going to sit at the top for an extra maybe 2 seconds. Take a couple like there's all of these. You're not taking into account of like the eccentric phase, like how slow the lowering is, or how slow the standing up is. Maybe the range of motion is a little bit different if you're using lighter or heavier weight. There's like all of these different factors that could and should probably be accounted for when discussing volume. So like I think it's just kind of like a flawed concept to really like track and measure progress or training or magnitude of training stress. And I think so I got the idea, I guess it was Chris Beardsley's idea of the effective reps model, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with, right?
I'm actually not entirely familiar. So assume, just give us,
okay,
yes.
okay.
Coach him up.
So I'd totally suggest Chris Beardsley's books. I think he has 3 of them. One of them I think is just called Hypertrophy. Another one is like called Strength is Specific. He's really good. He's a researcher. He's kind of a little dweeb, but he puts out really good information.
Shout out dweebs.
So the effective reps model essentially states that in order for a rep to be effective for strength and hypertrophy, you should have high motor unit recruitment. and a slow concentric contraction speed, which would essentially mean you should try to move the load fast, but the load should be heavy enough that it actually
doesn't
slow.
Yeah.
And then that's kind of that's the model that I would use.
Slow bar speeds are the goal.
Yep, that's the model that I would typically use for myself, and even when I'm programming.
So by
I'm looking for a lot
concentric,
of those effective reps.
You're not purposely making them lift it up slow. They're just lifting with high intent, but there's so much weight on the bar that the rep is quote unquote slow.
Yep. And who knows what the actual load should be? Like, is 80% moved at 0.5 meters per second? Is that slow enough to be considered an effective rep? Or who knows? But it's a pretty good informal way of kind of determining
what a good rep looks like, or what an effective stimulus is supposed to look like in that realm.
Do you program with percentages, or are you more of you see it and you're like, that's what I want the speed to be today?
I'm a total simp for percentages.
Okay.
Total simp for percentages. I just discussed this on my YouTube channel. I hate RPE.
You hate it.
I hate RPE.
Why?
I don't hate the idea of RPE.
It sounds good to you.
Yes, I hate the.
You would date RPE. You wouldn't marry RPE.
I hate the implementation, the common implementation of RPE.
Yeah. So you're very much 62.5% today.
Yeah. So when I program, I'm always going to use, not always, but usually if I'm going to prescribe a weight, I'll give them the percentage on Excel, auto populates, or it gives them the number to hit. But you're not married to the number. If the warm-up sets feel good, dude, go up a little bit.
Yeah.
If it feels shitty, go down.
Because that's usually the main argument against percentages, right? Is this idea that there is no auto regulation, and you're supposed to go in and you didn't get enough sleep the night before, you didn't eat enough, you're stressed out, whatever, all the things that people say, and then you go to squat and you're like, oh fuck me, 80% is 95% today or whatever.
Yeah.
How do you navigate that?
So the thing with RPE, how often do you guys do for yourself, in your own training? How often do you guys do an AMRAP set?
Oh, I do it often.
I do it all the time. So about 2 months ago, I hit 500 for 8.
Fuck me.
On back squat.
Only 8. Wow.
But so now that's my 8 rep max.
100%.
But if I was to go into that session and I'm I'm going to hit 500 for, I just want to do an RPE of 7. I probably would have done 3 reps.
Right.
But most people don't have a really good subjective way of determining how hard a set actually was.
Yeah.
Maybe I just suck at it. But at the same time, I've been lifting for so long. If I suck at it, someone who has less experience than me probably sucks at it.
I make all my athletes, when they first start working with me, even early phase, if I have NFL guys long enough, we'll do for example, 3x5, and let's say it's 7 RPE. We're going to do an AMRAP set of 80% of whatever that weight is, because you're going to find out real quick. If they do more than 12 reps of that, guess what, dude? That was not an RPE 7. That was a fucking 5. Right now, obviously, I have a coaching eye for it. I know that the bar speed should be getting a little slower, and I can sing like, yeah, I think that was 2 away. I'm like, no, it wasn't.
Yeah.
Put a 10 on each side, right?
Yeah.
But going to an AMRAP set, in my experience, is an incredible way to very quickly start to hone in on a better understanding of how far away someone is or isn't from failure. You have to have failure to know what failure is.
Yes.
Do you do AMRAPs with your athletes? And then if you do, are there caveats I need you to leave 1 or 2 in the tank? I don't need you to get pinned.
Yep. Absolutely.
Because I feel when we talk about this, one coach will hear it and be like, well, you got to go till you get
If
pinned.
he dies, he dies.
Usually,
thank you for saying that, Zach. I didn't say that. I didn't mention that. Thank you.
On Friday, I did AMRAP back squats and bench press with the volleyball team. And it's a small enough team where it's I'm going to be able to kind of watch everyone do it. So you're the one, and so there's a spotter.
You're the form general of you're done.
Yeah. So I can kind of, even if there's 3 girls squatting, I kind of know she probably has 1 more over here, 2 more. I'll keep my eye. All right, rack the bar over there. You got 1 more. Go ahead and do 1 more. Now rack it. So yeah, I have that caveat of, hey, I guess if you go to true failure, fine, try not to. If it happens, it happens. You got spotters.
Yeah.
I've taught them how to bail if the spotter sucks.
Yeah. I think that's good to put in context, because how people hear a message is different than usually how it's actually applied.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And especially you're going to have someone in the comments who are like, oh, you're stupid to do that. They can get hurt, blah, blah, blah. And I don't need to read that comment.
Yeah, that's right.
So I got to say one more thing about RPE. I don't think many people know this about RPE, but the original intent of RPE was for aerobic assessments. It was the Borg scale of 6 through 20, and the RPE, the number that someone would give, was supposed to correspond with their heart rate. And so now that concept has been bastardized in lifting. Yeah. So the Borg scale is 6 through 20, and if I remember right, the equation for the Borg scale is your heart rate equals RPE. Let's just say it's an RPE of 10 to make it simple, make the math simple. 10 out of 20. The heart rate is supposed to be RPE, which is 10 multiplied by 8.88 plus 38.2. Someone in the comments can fact check me if the equation's correct. Doesn't really matter. And then that number that equation spits out is supposed to correspond with what your heart rate is.
Got it.
And the equation's fairly accurate, and that's why it works well with like a VO2 max. And now, so people in lifting culture are like, oh, we're going to use RPE for lifting, which is a totally different thing than an aerobic assessment. And then, so now the scale isn't 6 through 20 anymore. It's 1 through 10. But then I've heard people like the barbell medicine guys, they'll say anything that's an RPE under 6 is just a warm-up set, so don't count it. So now it's really a 6 through 10 scale, which is a 5-point scale, which why don't you just call it 1 through 5, you know? And then like people will describe RPE in several different ways. People will say, we'll just use it as a substitute for reps and reserve. And it's like, well, now why don't you just call it reps and reserve? You're like making this new
shifted
thing.
to reps and reserve.
Actually.
I think that's easier for
it's easier.
It's
easier.
It's way easier.
It's way easier. And to that point, there isn't a single day in here with any athlete, unless we are maxing out because it's something that we have to do or it's been pre-planned or whatever. It's like the 0 reps in reserve still doesn't mean failure. It means you were able to complete the lift with good form, with some room. You know what I mean? We're pushing it, right?
Yeah.
But you completed the lift, right? And you did not fail. Like even 0 reps in reserve, it's like, okay, if you explain it that way, it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. So and I've heard other people describe RPE as bar speed. Like if the bar moves really fast, it's a low RPE. If it moves really slow, it's a high RPE, which I guess that corresponds to reps in reserve too. But like there's so many different kind of definitions and interpretations of RPE. I think most people are probably just not on the same wavelength when it comes to RPE. What is an RPE 8? Oh, the other thing too, sorry. Oh my God. It's a scale. So the people who make it a 6 through 10 scale, then they'll start calling things like a 7.5. So now you've just expanded the 5-point scale to a 10-point scale again. Why don't you just call a 7.5 what would that be? A 4.5?
Right.
A 4? That'd be a 4?
It would be a 4.
5? No, that'd be a 5. That's right in the middle of 6 through 10.
Not a math.
No, I don't know. I'm not a mathematician.
Yeah, we're not equipped for that sort of mental gymnastics.
I have a lot of issues, not with the idea or the concept of RPE.
It's the
implementation of it. Yeah.
So you love RPE.
Love it.
Does Haas Olympic use percentages?
That's a great question. I use both. So what I do is, for example, in the programs that I write, if let's just say, hey, you're going to hit a set of 5 here. I'll give them like a percentage range of like, this is a good kind of starting point. And then I'll also say like RPE 8. So like people kind of have the option if they want to.
It adds more context too.
And they can use, obviously they're going to use warm-up sets going into their working sets. So they're going to figure it out. But I kind of give them 2 ways of determining the intensity.
Have you guys have you messed around with like velocity-based training or anything like that? Do you guys have those tools, and what do you think about it?
Yeah. Were we talking about this?
We were. Yes, we were. We were talking about
it's fun to use. Maybe I'm a fucking idiot. I avoided it. Maybe I'm an idiot. But like, I don't actually. It's fun to use. Oftentimes, I feel like if I use it with athletes I work with, I think to myself after the working sets have been done and completed with the VBT, I'm like, am I going to change anything based on this data that just spit out to me? No, probably not. Yeah. But like in the real world, I don't think it works as well for girls because they're just less competitive than men are. Like in the real world, if you give a group of 3 guys and they're back squatting, you give them a tendo unit, it's going to reinforce some competition. So I mean, there's good use for it, but like outside of that, I'm not huge on it.
Like all we use it for is like intent. So we have like the elite form, and actually our women really like it. So we have a big projector, and it puts basically
It's like
the
a
wattage
leaderboard?
or velocity on there. So they go back and forth, and then on the screen, if you hit the high score, your face flashes on everybody's screen. And so they're back and forth and like, you got 2.5. I'm going, no, let me get another set. Like I want to get 2.6.
Yeah.
And so I think it drives that. We'll use it more for that intent than actually like if it's above 0.8, you need to add weight. I usually just tell them add weight or whatever.
So so the way I used to implement it would be it'd be like a threshold. You have to stay above 0.7 or whatever it is. I actually think I actually just made an Instagram post about this pretty recently too. Is that like I think a better way if you're going to implement it is I want them below the speed that I gave them. So at least I know, because what happens is like you tell them, hey, you have to stay above 0.7. Well, then they just did a set of like 0.92.
Yeah.
Like their average velocity. Like that's not very stimulating. So then they add a little bit of weight. Now they're like 0.87, add a little bit of weight. 0.81, now they've done all of their working sets and they didn't get much out of it. Whereas if you say, hey, if you're above 0.5, we're adding a lot of weight and you still got to try to move 0.5. And then I want them actually underneath.
I think it's great for, if you look at female versus male, what's the one thing you have to tell women to do? It's probably add weight. And what is the one thing you have to tell guys is take weight off.
Have you found that to be the case?
So much. Men? Like if we're trying to work power, guys just want to load up the bar for a 1 RM. And it's like, dude, you didn't move it fast enough for it to be considered, a power. And then women, I think it's great to show like, yo, you got more in the tank. Like you move that squat at 1 meter a second, which is so fast. Like keep adding, keep adding, keep adding.
That's definitely been my experience with women. With guys, I think a lot of guys are like, fuck, I don't want to lift. And then they just end up putting light weight on the bar. They don't want to do
I'm
it.
good, dude.
Yeah. We're girls, it's like they do want to, but they're like insecure. They're not confident in their abilities, so they go lighter than they should. That's been my experience.
Well, I think part of it, it's like your training age. Like if you've never lifted before, especially for women, you haven't really lifted. A lot of the reasons for lifting are negative. Like you don't want to look like us, all these things. And so I think, if you just show this of like, here's what I want the weight, and there's no, like they don't think of it as weight on the bar. We just think of it as speed.
Yeah.
And then that way we're training the qualities we want to train. Because I think too many times is like coaches are like, it's a speed session, and then you'll see the bar move and you're like, that was so slow. Like it's way too heavy for what we're trying to do. So yeah, I think it's like has its place. But like I've never been someone where it's like you have to be between 0.5 and 0.7. And,
see, that's what our football team
in theory it sounds great
done in the past, and it ends up kind of just
waters down the
session.
session.
It like doesn't. It's just not very effective in real life. Yeah.
So can we go like out of season, in season? Does your exercise selection stay the same? Do you switch it? Like what are the big things you switch from out of season to in season?
Exercise selection pretty much stays relatively consistent. I'm always like, it's always going to be, we're always going to clean, we're always going to snatch. I'll add variation with it. Like we'll split clean, we'll clean off blocks, we'll hang, we'll power, we'll go from the floor. So like there'll be variation mixed in, but it's like so much of what I do is just barbell work. We'll front squat, we'll back squat, we'll squat to pins, we'll squat to a box, we'll zercher every once in a while, but it's like the same. I mean, it's a squat, you know what I mean? Like unilateral stuff, we'll lunge, we'll step up, we'll split squat, we'll Bulgarian split squat, and just like rotate them throughout. But like it's pretty consistent exercise selection wise.
So you'd say that the volume probably changes.
Yeah.
Or like how would that be the biggest?
So, okay.
Let's go like clean out of season versus clean in season.
Great question. So like off season, we'll do a lot more complexes. So I get them a lot more reps of the Olympic lifts, where in season, it'll be like, hey, we're going to power, we're going to hang. You're going to get your, maybe a couple sets of 3, a couple sets of 2, maybe a single here and there. That'd be the difference there for like things like front squat, back squat. I guess the same thing. In the off season, we're going to do a lot more sets, a lot more reps. In season, we're going to keep it less.
Basically, you're not overcomplicating it.
Yeah.
using some common sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, hell yeah.
I feel like so many coaches
Common
are
sense
like,
for the win.
this is like an off-season type lift, and this is an in-season as far as like exercise selection. But it's
Right.
like
Yeah.
you still want to maintain these same qualities, so train them the same way. Just adjust either weight, load, whatever.
Right. Typically, I'll use VBT more
In season.
than off season.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I want to ask this before we get into like the final segments of the show, because I think that this is probably something a lot of people would be interested in hearing about from you. Your growth on Instagram and social media in general. Can you talk about just like what that process has looked like for you? Because you and I were talking in the truck the other day about how like, you know, like we've kind of been doing this thing where we've kind of been growing alongside each other, and it's been a cool thing. But can you talk about just your journey on social media? What made you decide to actually start taking posting seriously, and then your transition to actually having very good programs? I've purchased Will's programs; they're fantastic. I will say, very good. And then, just kind of your whole experience with that.
Yeah. Well, so the reason I started doing it was because, as you guys know, you don't make a lot of money as an assistant strength and conditioning coach, especially at like a mid-major Summit League school. And so I was engaged at the time, wasn't married yet, but like my fiance was making more money than me. It's like, it's just kind of embarrassing, you know? And I was like, I need to do something to start making more money. And I followed you, I followed Austin, I followed Jake, Dan Bach, like all these guys that are like popular on Instagram. And it's like, I'm just going to start doing what they do. And so I just started posting, and you get better with time. You get better at like how you want your kind of message to be delivered, how you want to sound, whether you want to write long captions, short captions. Like you just get better with the content, how you want to come
Yeah, you
off.
find your own voice. And
Yeah.
your own
Did you have any
flavor.
reservations when you started, like of between never picking up the camera to I'm going to record today? I know for me, like I was like, I don't want to record myself working out. Like no one wants to see that. Now I do it all the time.
Yeah. I did a little bit, but I just was like, I kind of had the mindset of like,
Who cares?
who
Like,
cares
yeah.
if people are going to like make fun of you, like they're
cool.
probably not like your friends anyways. Like,
Right.
You know what I mean? So
Fuck them.
yeah, fuck them. Yeah. So I mean, there's a hump to get over for sure with that. I just started posting, and the thing that I've really tried to avoid, and I think I've done a decent job with it, is like posting obvious shit. Trying to avoid like, here are the 5 reasons you should be taking creatine. Here are the 5 reasons you should be getting 8 hours of sleep. Like that kind of shit, you know, I've really, really, really tried to avoid doing that, so that I do have like my own personality, my own, is it niche or niche? Niche.
Yeah.
My own niche.
Yeah. People say both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll go with whatever I said.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, we get it.
Yeah.
Shout out.
It's not as
niche.
bad as my Spanish.
Last night, can I tell that story?
Yeah, go ahead.
Last night, so you know, Will, he's Midwest, North Dakota. He's 40 miles away from the Canadian border. Tex-Mex and authentic Tex-Mex. It's probably not something he encounters frequently. Would you say that's fair?
That's correct.
And we were looking at the menu, and he says to both Dan and I, he says, "What are frijoles?" and Daniel Bach, being Dan, he goes, "What?" He's like, that is beans, and it's pronounced frijoles. and so we obviously all shared a good laugh there. And then when Will went to order it, bless his heart, he tried to say it.
I attempted.
He tried to say it, but he was like, he completely butchered the enunciation, and it was just not, he like said it incorrectly, just a different way. And it was awesome. And of course the waitress was like, she didn't even bat an eye, but I laughed. And then anyway, so what were we talking
We're
about?
talking about Instagram and social media.
Yeah. What stuff have you found that you posted that you're like, this is super basic, no one's going to connect with, and then it just like takes off?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that though. I've definitely had posts where I'm like, oh, I'm so smart, this is gonna hit,
Those
and then you
never
get
work.
like way less likes,
Way
and
less.
comments than you think you're gonna get. But I don't know if there's anything that I thought was gonna be basic that ended up being a really big.
I think there's something to be said about that, because I've talked about a lot with many coaches, and we've kind of talked about this outside of the podcast, where it's like the low IQ posts, the ones, which translation people means like the ones that
my content.
We spend a little less time on the caption isn't as long or in depth. You know, the editing isn't the best it could possibly be relative to our skill at creating like this, what we would consider to be like a high level piece of content. Those pieces almost always underperform relative to the ones where it's like training today.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, going back to like the growth thing. So I kind of remember where I was at. I needed some way to supplement some income for me. And so like following you, following Jake, Austin, Dan, I just started doing that. And then the following came, and then it's like, now I have at least somewhat of an audience that I can put out a product. And I had no idea how well it was going to be. It was the Launch 1.0 program. And I was like, holy shit, I made like 12 sales in a week.
Yeah.
Which now that I think about, that's not very much. But like at that time, I was like, wow, I can make this happen.
Yeah.
And so I kept doing it, kept kind of like refining the skill of content creation, having my own voice, putting out a message that people can resonate with. And that's kind of where I'm at with it. And, but I have you know what's really interesting to me? Would you guys, you both have big following. Would you call yourself an influencer? Like if someone was to ask you what you do, would you ever say that you're like that's part of your job as an influencer? Okay, no.
I think
No.
I think
Okay.
it's funny because like at some point, if you continue to grow, you are whether you consider yourself to be or not.
So
That I have seen happen.
So where I'm going with this is that there's a lot of people who don't have an audience on Instagram that will post on Instagram or YouTube or whatever. They'll try to use social media. They're not they don't have much of an audience. And I'm not trying to sound like arrogant or conceited or anything like that, but then they will try to use the term influencer as a pejorative.
Right.
And it's like, if someone wants to, I don't call myself an influencer, but like if someone were to call me an influencer as like an insult, I'd be like, that's not insulting. Like I've worked to grow this and I do influence people in a really positive way that like you with 800 followers that's trying to do what I'm doing.
By the way, right.
Can't do.
Right.
And
I think there's
I just thought about that right now.
Like you have a degree, you work in the setting that you like, basically you're just filming like what you do and putting it out there.
Yeah.
And you actually coach people at a high level.
You walk the walk.
Like you do that. So I think it'd be kind of like if, I don't know, we did a guitar blog. Like I don't know anything about guitars or anything.
Right.
Like, you do it. You walk the walk. You talk the talk. I think that's the like you have a degree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not saying if you don't have a degree you can't do it.
I think also the content you're creating that's what it ultimately
It's
comes
authentic
down
to you.
Yeah.
I was just about to say that. Will, you've mentioned a couple times finding your voice and just like, you know, your own. What you've done is like when I go to your page, when you speak, when you put stuff, it is 110% Will Ratelle.
Mm-hmm.
You're not trying to be like anybody else. You're not. And I think that is honestly like, you know, if you want to put gasoline on the fire to growth on Instagram, is you have to be willing to unapologetically be yourself and be willing to put yourself out there. And then the people that are attracted to you, they'll find you.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yep.
And then if you grow to the place where you have 150,000 followers or something like that, and you're an influencer as a byproduct of how many people identify or enjoy what you're doing, then great.
Yep.
I think it's a good thing.
I do too. Yeah. It really irks me when people like use that as.
Well, I don't think
as
you
an
set
insult.
out. You didn't set out to be an influencer.
Exactly.
You're
Right.
set out to be a coach to share what you like doing, and then if you resonate with that, great. If you don't, keep swiping.
Yeah. And so you asked about like having reservations before I started doing that, and I said a little bit I did, and now that I do have this like audience on Instagram and YouTube, like going back to like calling someone an influencer as a pejorative. There's a lot of coaches who don't use social media. They do their brick and mortar thing, or they're in the college sector and they don't use social media, and they're good coaches. That's obviously true, but it also really bothers me when someone who is a good coach, they'll then take to social media and they'll like make this virtue signaling statement like all these influencer coaches, there's guys who are in the trenches like me. I've been in here for 10 years doing my thing and I'm not trying to show it on Instagram. It's like, well, maybe you should.
Maybe you should. You dumb broke motherfucker.
Maybe you should.
Yeah.
That doesn't make you any more righteous because you're like, I'm not going to flaunt what I'm doing on social media. I'm just in the trenches coaching hard.
Yeah, good
like,
for you. How's your dating life? You know, like for fuck's sake.
Yeah, that's one thing that really bothers me.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
It's like, because my thing is like, I used to sit back on my phone and I would watch Joel fucking Seedman do dumb shit and I would hate on him like everybody else. But then one day I had this realization, especially when I got into like what people refer to as like high performance with me working with pros. It's just, you're just working with, anyway. Like, come on. But I got into the space and I was like, oh, a lot of people here who are making a lot of money on Instagram, who are putting out content, don't know shit. And they're coaching, they've made a way, but maybe from a coaching perspective, I can clearly see like a Seedman. I'm just gonna keep using him as the example. So,
he's an easy example.
So yes, I'm like, this motherfucker is making a lot of money. He is having a lot of influence and impact on people. People are buying what he's selling. And in my opinion, could not be farther from snake water, right?
Yep.
Like it's just absurd. So, but here he is, he's having success. He's growing his brand. He's doing his thing. And I'm on the sidelines hating.
Yep.
Like a little bitch.
Yep.
Well, and if you have good stuff, like if you're not sharing it, you're not moving the field forward.
Yep.
So you're kind of like gatekeeping all your things you've learned, which I think if you really
Sitting
want the
on
field,
your pedestal.
yeah, to advance and everything, like you owe it to everybody to like share what you're good at, and that's what's going to ultimately make it better for coaches and athletes in the future.
Yeah.
Like share what you're good at.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we got to do segments because we're already past time, but we've been having too much fun. So let's.
I can't believe it's 1:30.
Yeah, dude, we've been ripping. All right, I'm gonna read the first segment. Zach and I are. If you've listened to every episode, you know that the segment piece and the reading piece is tough for us, but we're gonna get it. So this first segment is brought to you by Squat Wedgies for the best damn squat wedges you've ever used. We used them today. This segment is called Three Things. Will, if there were three things that you would give to a coach who's just getting started in strength and conditioning to help get them to where you're at today, what would those three things be?
So I would say post on social media because one, it's a really easy way for like self-reflection and like looking back at what you used to think and how you've, I don't want to say how you've changed, but how you've refined your coaching, I guess. So use social media to your advantage. Two, I want to say like have confidence in your abilities. Yeah, have confidence. Even if you're wrong, have confidence in your abilities. If you end up realizing that you were wrong in something, just update your thought process. And three, I would say like reach out to a bunch of people, but I don't think that's good advice actually either. Because I know if people like randomly reach out to me for like to hop on a Zoom call, it's like no, get away from me. Like no, don't do that. So like I don't know. I don't have a third one. I'm sorry. I don't have a third answer for that.
All right,
what's something you would say?
What's something I would say? I think I love what you said about posting because like you are forced to actually formulate. Because I think a lot of people think that they have concrete ideas around what they're doing and why. But if you were to ask them to write it down on a piece of paper, they wouldn't be able to do it very well.
Yeah, if you put it out on social media, now you've entered the world where everyone can see what you think.
Yes.
And now you're in the arena, everyone can criticize you and scrutinize.
Yep.
And if you're unwilling to do that with your ideas, you probably haven't formulated your ideas very well.
Yeah.
So
I love that. I love having confidence, move forward with confidence. And then something you said that I actually think could be your number three is when you're presented with new and better information, being flexible and humble enough to say, you know what I was doing wasn't right, or I could be doing better now that I have this new information.
You're evolving as a coach.
Yeah, being willing to change when you receive new information and hold yourself up to scrutiny.
Yeah.
So let's make that be three because I think you layered it in already.
Works for me.
Rant and rave. So pick something you want to rant about. Anything in the world. Could be fitness, life, whatever. And then a rave. Brought to you by Plyomat.
Fuck, you guys are putting me on the spot.
Just too easy. Rant about the Olympic
All
law.
right, yeah. What's something that you see in the fitness industry right now? You're like, I don't love this.
All the technology. We kind of talked about it.
did.
All of the technology. It's all like really fun to use. Like if I had access to it, I would probably use it for myself for like so many different things, but it just overcomplicates things. I think it can be really easy to get sucked into using these things and then overcomplicate or try to make yourself smarter than you really are to impress other coaches, other athletes, try to get buy-in, but then you end up kind of looking like an idiot. Which, I mean, with like the force plate data, VBT, like even just with that, with force plate and VBT, you can easily start explaining why you're going to use it to, no, I did do this with the basketball team that I worked with. We did force plate testing for the men's basketball team for like 2 or 3 years. And the basketball coaches didn't give a shit. The players didn't give a shit, but I was like sending them reports of like, of what their RSI is, what their A gradient is, what their S gradient is, what their peak power is, the force time curve, and all. It's like, they don't really give a shit. Now I'm just wasting my time. So that's one thing. Don't get sucked into all that stuff unless you really know what you're doing and you're working with a population or a clientele that's going to actually buy into it. So that was my rant, my rave. So that means something that I enjoy.
Yeah, something that you're like right now. You're like, I like this. I want to see more of this.
I want to see more Olympic lifting stuff. I love it. I think I got to give myself a little bit of credit of like trying to swing the pendulum back to my side of the argument.
Yeah.
I think I really have convinced a lot of people who are opposed to the Olympic lifts to give them a shot. And I want to see more Olympic lifting content. And even like, do you guys follow Brandon Accardi?
Yes.
Dude, awesome.
What a great
super
dude.
smart,
So cool.
super smart dude.
Yeah.
He like his ability to talk about the Olympic lifts and their application in training. Oh my, I learned so much from him, just like a single Instagram post. And like, I want to see more of that stuff because it makes me learn so much.
He's a hell of a coach too.
Yeah,
he's another
awesome.
one of those ones. I've watched him evolve tremendously. Just in like an example is like being willing to add plyometrics into his weightlifting program with all his athletes, you know, all of Watson's stuff. So great follow.
So that's my rave.
You want to do the last one?
Ooh, this is great. So where were you guys last night? What Mexican
Lupe
restaurant?
Tortilla.
So you're at Lupe Tortilla. You're headed to the restroom to wash your hands before you eat your frijoles. And you see a young guy sitting at a table by himself. And he looks like he could get some advice. What advice would you give him?
Just random, unsolicited advice. You're going to walk down, you're going to whisper in his ear, you're going to say, hey, buddy. Boom.
XYZ.
And then you're just going to go wash your hands, walk away.
This is going to sound like a joke, but it's not.
Okay.
It's don't be fucking soft. Whatever you're going through, like figure out if you're depressed, why are you depressed? If you have anxiety, why are you anxious? And make whatever changes in your behaviors and habits to fix that. Make those changes, and you're gonna feel a lot better about yourself.
Don't be soft.
Don't be soft. Figure out what's wrong. Find a solution, and then act on it. Yep.
That will solve most of your problems, actually.
Yep.
Yeah. That is great advice.
Yep. Don't be a fence sitter. That'd be one.
Yeah.
Don't be a fence sitter.
Don't do it.
Some random guy at Lupe Tortilla just got the best of both. Will, thank you, dude, for coming down here and hanging out with us.
This was such a fun weekend. I can't even. My wife is so annoyed with me for how much I talked about. Oh man, I'm sad. I have to go back in like an hour.
Will, you have, between YouTube, Instagram, programs, a lot of ways people can not only find you, but get connected with what you do. So take your time, give people ways where they can find you, and then some of the things that you offer.
Search my name on Instagram, YouTube. Be really easy to find me. What was that?
What's it at Will Ratelle?
Yeah, just look up Will Ratelle on Instagram or YouTube. Be really easy to find me. Subscribe to my YouTube channel.
And some of the programs you offer, your online stuff.
Yep. So I have 3 ebooks that I sell, which is the Haas Project, Haas Olympic, and Launch 2.0. And then I have a program that I did with Blaine McConnell. His Instagram name is Story Pobby. I don't know where that comes from.
I need to ask him why is your Instagram name?
I don't know
what does
where
it
that
mean
comes from. So I have those products. The ebooks, I think you get more value from like the ebook section than the actual program because you can, and the concepts are in the ebook, so then you can implement them however you want.
Got it.
But buy both. Buy all 3.
Buy all 3, and you can get a discount there's a 2-for-1 discount with a discount code. It's on my website if you want to get it at a discount.
I heard if they buy all 3, they can do a 15-minute Zoom call with you at that point.
You've heard incorrect.
Buy program. Don't be soft. Will Ratelle, thank you for joining us, man. Hopefully we'll have you on again in the future.
It's a blast. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Later, y'all. Thanks for listening and watching.